Wesley So won the Sinquefield Cup 2025. As you can see from the cross table, it was a very tight contest. In fact, 3 players shared first, Caruana, Pragnananda and Wesley So, and then Wesley won the tie-break. So very tight indeed. Seems like Wesley has been on the scene for yonks, and he only has, but he's still only 31 years old. Has he got the ambition to go further, maybe qualify for the candidates? It's hard to say. Sometimes he seems he cuts a frustrating figure for a lot of his fans. You know, he's such a talented player. You know, I've seen him in London play and at the London Chess Classic, and he really is so strong. But sometimes you kind of want to say, go on, risk a bit more. Anyway, I'd like to show you one of his games from the Sinquefield Cup. In fact, his last round win against Abdusattorov, which was a positional masterpiece. And this just shows how talented he is. So I hope you enjoy this. Have your drink ready. Hope you've got a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or perhaps even something stronger, because we've got a very nice think and drink moment halfway through. All right, enjoy the game. Wesley So playing white, and solid so far from Abdusattorov. Bishop c4. Interesting, earlier in the tournament, Wesley had played the white side of the Spanish against Gukesh. So here he mixes things up a bit and goes for this very old continuation. You know, Morphy played like this, going full throttle for his opponent. So it's very old, lots of old theory. So a little bit off the beaten track. So, you know, good to try and sidestep your opponent, basically. d5, so Abdusattorov reacts in the normal way. So if pawn takes knight, then pawn takes bishop. So bishop b5. Now, knight e4 is a very popular continuation, but knight d7 played, also known. And castles. Now, that pawn on e5 can't be taken because there's a pin. So bishop e7. And now Wesley exchanges on c6 and takes on d4, threatening the pawn on c6. Already quite a tricky position, actually. As I said, it's pretty well known. If bishop b7 covering that pawn, then knight f5 is such a beautiful position. Or knight e5, then bishop f4 hits the knight, and then white takes on c6. So knight b8 played by Abdusattorov, and you can see the idea is that this bishop covers f5, but also g4 prevents queen g4. And also black wants to get it in c5 to push that knight away. Nevertheless, Wesley is still able to build up on the king side. The queen is in a nice position, wants to nudge over to g3 and then get this pawn duo rolling on the king side. So you can see that Wesley has a pawn majority here. And that pawn on e5 is the kind of spearhead, covers some really important defensive squares. Having said all that, black is still alright here. a5 is the normal continuation. Just pushing forward on the queen side, wanting to create some weaknesses, and then later on c5. But Abdusattorov goes with bishop e6, and this isn't so accurate. So it looks solid, but actually it allows Wesley to build up on the king side. Bishop h6 is now threatened. You can see that, yeah, white is building up nicely. That pawn on e5, beautiful attacking wedge, and the knights look very active. So c5, bishop exchanged off, and as we're going to see, that pawn is a little bit weak. But it's this next move that I really like. c4. So that fixes this pawn on c5. Black doesn't want to take here. I mean, the pawns are a complete wreck. So it means this bishop on e7 is really restricted, and as we'll see, that plays a very important part in the game. So what should Black do? There is a lot of pressure on these pawns. You know, potentially Queen h3 coming, and there's, you know, there nasty pin on this diagonal. So for example, knight c6 is the move you want to make, but then Queen h3, threatening knight g6, threatening this, and after rook f5. Doesn't hold the position because of this. And queen takes rook. So Abdusattorov had to play d4. Now that's not a beautiful move. So the structure is permanently fixed. And yeah, makes this bishop look not so great. Queen h3, hitting e6, threatening knight g6 check. So rook f5 forced. So Black centre holds together. There's no longer c takes d5. However, g4, pushing the rook back. Because if rook takes pawn, then knight g6 check. So the rook goes back, and knight d3. What a fantastic blockader that is. So that pawn is fixed. The knight looks at that pawn on c5. And makes way for the f-pawn. Knight c6, bishop d2. At this moment, the engine will show you that white is only slightly better. But already, I think this is a bit of a nightmare position for Black. Because where is Black's counterplay? It's not through the middle, not through the queen side. In the meantime, white is rolling on the king side. And in the long term, that's hard to meet. Knight b4 played. Which one are you going to exchange off? Well, of course, the bishop. You want to keep that beautiful knight on d3 and then f4. So this is the plan. Roll the pawns on the king side. But you need patience because Black is defending very well. So rook f2. At various moments over the next few moves, Black could try g5. But obviously that move is quite fraught because it opens the king. Instead, Abdusattorov just decides to advance on the queen side and basically just hold his position. Queen g2, that's nice. Centralize the queen. But you can see that, well, queen c8 basically shows that Black can only wait in this position. I mean, you can perhaps exchange the queens, but that endgame is also very, very pleasant for white. b3. So it's possible to wait, but at some moment, white is going to roll on the king side. But instead, a4. And this is very interesting. You know, if Wesley wants to keep going on the king side, you know, maybe start shuffling across, well, you have to be aware that Black can now create counterplay. There's potential for the queen to come in. So Wesley decides to take on a4. Well, that stirs things up. And after this move, so 2 pawns threatened, but now he calmly comes back and defends. Quite extraordinary. Still, Abdusattorov can do nothing. Right. Here, whoops. Here is where I would like you to have a think, and I'm going to have a drink. Tea, I can assure you, in spite of banging into the microphone. How would you play with white in this position? And I'm looking for a strategy here. Okay, so you have a think. I'll have a drink. White play. Do you want to improve your chess? Get exclusive access to live masterclasses with yours truly? Get hot opening ideas? Then subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, and for just $25 a month you get a newsletter with a detailed test game to gauge your standard of play, a monthly video with puzzles to test your calculating skills, a monthly opening survey where I give my take on a hot variation, access to an archive of over 100 opening surveys, access to video playlists so you can research your favourite openings using the PowerPlayChess archives. And as a patron, you are able to join in the exclusive live masterclasses where you can ask me questions directly. All this for only $25 a month. That's exceptional value. So do subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess. Enjoy the benefits and improve your chess. Well, it's clear that white is not breaking through on the queen side, in spite of this extra pawn, but white's knight is tied to defending. White has to break through on the king side. Now at the moment it's not working. If everything breaks open, then the king is too exposed. Imagine this, and imagine everything being exchanged off, and then a queen g6 check. Not too good. So what does Wesley do? Well, you just watch. He decides to go for a walk with the king. Where's that king want to go? b3. Really nice. And in the meantime, Abdusattorov can do nothing. He's just shuffling round. Now with the king on b3, finally, protecting this pawn, and both pawns actually, then it could be that the knight can come back into play. Got to be a little bit careful because that rook can switch across to attack this, so it can't go too far, but it's worth bearing in mind. And now white has a much freer hand to advance on the king side because, well, there's no exposed king on that side of the board when the position blows open. Should be safer over here. So h4. Rook h1. Here we go. h5 is coming soon. But there's no need to rush it. This is what I love about this position. That Wesley just takes his time until everything's perfect. And then h5. He's in. So it's clear that if the h-file opens, then this would be a disaster for black, with f5 coming as well. So g5 is pretty much forced. And then this could get tricky. Wesley decides to avoid that. And something like this, and yeah, it's messy. It's a bit liminal. So instead, very typically, he keeps control. Just defending this one. An exchange, and then rook f3. The rook was doing nothing on the h-file because it's blocked, but now returns to take here. And this endgame should be very good for white, with the knight coming back here and that a pawn ready to roll down the board. King g8, exchange, queen c6. Still a little bit hazardous. The king could be safer. It's a little bit exposed here, but Wesley is keeping control. King g7. Knight d3. Finally, the knight returns to this beautiful square on d3, attacking the c-pawn. Bishop e7. Queen g2. So f1 is covered, and these squares as well, along with the knight. It's interesting how Wesley plays this. He just wants to get everything perfect before he goes for the next phase. Queen f8. Abdusattorov can still only wait in this position. It must have been very frustrating for him. Queen b7. That's a nice pin. So it keeps the queen tied to defending the bishop. King g8. Queen c6. Threatening the pawn. Okay, so what happens if queen f1? So this is black's only chance. This didn't happen. But then there's a check. King steps up, then queen takes bishop check. And if bishop f8, queen e6 check. And that's going to be decisive. I mean, I'm sure there are a few ways to win this, but one very clear method would simply be to exchange queens and then push the a-pawn. Really simple. So after queen c6, queen h6 was played, defending the pawn. Queen e8 check. And g5 was the final move. So if queen takes pawn, then queen takes pawn check. Now, well, you can exchange the queens in various ways, but okay, let's keep the king as far away as possible. And a5, and that pawn goes through. Well, that was absolutely superb. I'm sure many of you are going to reference famous king marches, like Petrosian was famous for them, Nimzovich as well. I think it's just a really attractive strategy. And yeah, it seems to me absolutely sound. And Abdusattorov just got caught out pretty badly there. Never really recovered from a poor opening. Some key moves. c4. Blockading that pawn. That was the problem for this bishop all the way through the game. And then after this, knight b4. And now we've got this beautiful good knight against bad bishop position. Really difficult to play. And then this wonderful king march. Putting the king on b3 before going for the kill on the king's side. Fantastic stuff from Wesley. Before I go, let me just tell you that I'm going to be starting up my book reviews shortly. So the next live broadcast on the channel for everyone will be on Sunday the 14th of September. Watch out for that. I'm going to be interviewing Thomas Enqvist, a Swedish international master who's written a book on Ulf Andersson called Ulf the Attacker. I'm a big fan of Ulf Andersson, so I'm very much looking forward to interviewing Thomas about that. So do join us on Sunday the 14th of September and you'll be able to ask lots of questions. Thanks for watching.